everybody. We are live again, and this time we are going to interview Bethany Swain. She was a photojournalist and multimedia producer with CNN. So Bethany, if you want to introduce yourself to everybody.
Good morning. I'm excited to be here. So I have done broadcasts before on television. This is my first time doing it strictly on the web, and it's great to talk with you. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the 10 years that I spent at CNN as a photojournalist. So when people hear that term, oftentimes they'll think of still photography because it has the word photo in it. But most of what I did as a photojournalist was in video. So if you watched CNN on TV, that's the kind of stuff that I was doing behind the camera. A little bit in the studio, but most of it was out in the fields doing reporting from all over the world, and a lot here in the DC bureau where I was based.
Very cool. So I just posted in the Facebook chat. If any kids have questions while we're doing the interview, please go ahead and just have your parents comment them, and we'll share them on the screen so you can everybody will be able to see the question, and then Bethany will answer it for you. So until somebody asks a question in the chat, I have some questions for you.
Great.
And this is kind of like picking your favorite child. What would be your favorite story that you've done?
Oh my goodness, yeah. So it definitely is. Done a lot of things that I really enjoyed. So some of my stuff that I still think about, after the fact, years later, some of the traveling that I did. So I went to Afghanistan. Hold on one second. Hello, friends. My boys are very excited about this broadcast. Okay. Hey, friends. Remember we talked about live on the set? Drew? Okay. And we're back. So going to Afghanistan was one of my favorite international assignments. And I went for about a week. I was traveling with General Jones, who was the NATO commander at the time. And so we got to be and see what was happening from trying to fight the Taliban, which got to go to President Karzai's palace. And it was the kind of assignment that I was one of the only women that was going. It's so much so that every time that we checked in, they had me listed as Mr. Swain, because the default of all of the forms was so much that it was going to be a man that they didn't even have a place to be like, oh, Mr. No, I only have a Misters on here. I was like, nope, it's just wrong. I actually,
right.
am a woman on this assignment here.
Right. And you sent me a video of your time in Afghanistan. Is it okay if I share it?
Absolutely. Let's take a look.
All right, so let's switch over. I gotta add this to the stream. All right. So let's watch this video.
Bethany Swain saw recently in Afghanistan and how playing along in the war zone sometimes. All right,
so you lead us over there? All right. So Friday is something that a couple of our soldiers came together and decided they really wanted to help the community. The kids love it. You've asked us, this is Black Friday, can we come play?
Love to play.
It's just a great way for the kids to kind of interact with the soldiers, see that we're all here helping you, we're all having a good time trying to make this place, make Jalalabad and Afghanistan as a whole a safer, happier place for you.
The impact is great. I mean, not only does it improve our morale as soldiers here, but it also it has a great effect on the kids, like their friends, basically. Just like broken English-speaking friends.
There are places, I'm sure, that... I have to tell you something! Something looks a little out of place.
Almost everybody out there in that village knows
minutes.
Get you some first aid for that.
They keep us safe, and we keep them safe.
We got a little kid named Tupac. He seems to be everybody's favorite.
There are a lot of airmen that are doing a lot of tougher assignments. I guess I kind of lucked out with getting to play with these guys every Friday. I feel very fortunate to have been selected to come here.
All right, that was an awesome video. Thank you. Hopefully it showed.
Yeah, so I don't know. I couldn't see it. I don't know if it
Okay,
broadcast.
hopefully it showed.
Yeah.
Oh no, somebody said they can't see the video. Sorry about that.
Oh God, that's on our end.
No. All right, well, I'm gonna paste the link to it so everybody can watch it.
Yeah.
So, sorry about that, everybody. I'm still new with this StreamYard thing, so I apologize for that.
Yep. Technology can do a lot of amazing
Yes.
things, but sometimes not. So I actually had those kind of problems when I was in Afghanistan. So this was in 2006. So it was way before we would have done anything as cool as this on Facebook. So when I was working on the stories, one of the things that we did is we would transmit them back. Almost, we would, an FTP. So it's almost like sending an email file back once we had finished the putting everything together, and it was taking hours and hours and hours. And so we actually didn't sleep for the time while I was there, because while we would do all of our reporting during the day, and then at night when the general was sleeping, when everyone else was sleeping, we were putting everything all together so that way we could send it back.
Very cool. Very, very frustrating, I bet.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, it definitely was, because you could see normally when you're sending something like where it would count, the numbers would count down that it was advancing. This was the opposite. The numbers kept like going in the other direction.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
For how much minutes are we outside?
I can hear.
Yes, I'm sure we're not the only house that has had their systems a little bit flown upside down.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of us are working from home with our kids. I've got mine sitting on the floor here next to me with his rabbit. So another question that I have.
Yeah.
Did you do stories locally? Did you do any stories here in Maryland? Okay.
Sure. Yep. So I was in the DC bureau, right? So in Washington, DC. So that was where I was based. So I spent most of my time working in the DC region. So I was regularly assigned to cover the Pentagon, the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill. So we spent a lot of time in DC covering all of the movers and shakers and politicians and our government officials. But some of my favorite stories were when I got to meet real people. So it's amazing when you are a journalist and a photographer, people would invite us into their lives. So I love being able to tell their stories. So where it was, neat to be on the front lines of history and getting to share that, and often being the first to know things. Some of my favorite stories were ones where I got to interact with real people and tell their stories. So when people go into journalism, they usually have a couple of different motivations. So a lot of my colleagues now at the University of Maryland are former print reporters, and they're really, really passionate about holding officials accountable and really doing truth to power. And I would say that one of my favorite things about being a journalist and as a photographer still is telling stories that people wouldn't hear, wouldn't know about otherwise. So, that's definitely some of the things that I think can be memorable in a different kind of a way, is that, being able to tell stories that might got missed or people wouldn't hear if we weren't there paying attention and asking those questions.
Right. Okay. And actually, you shared another video with me. I'm gonna try to share it again.
Yeah, so let's see.
I pulled up the broadcast on my phone so I can make sure that the video is actually broadcasting this time. So this one is called Kangaroo Kids.
Yeah.
And I will paste the link to this one as well. Oops, let me share. Oh, nope, it's not going to let me.
So I wonder if I pulled it up on mine and shared this from my screen, if that would.
Try
Yeah,
sharing
1
the screen.
second. See, there's so many different ways that we can do this. Problem solving is.
Oh wait, I may have fixed it. I may have fixed the issue. So,
Ooh,
all right.
okay.
Let's see. Can you see it? Can you see it?
I sure can. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Awesome.
You think jump
So
roping is
here's the next
easy?
video.
Well, the Kangaroo Kids jump roping team is about to change your mind. This is a sport that's actually competitive on an international level, and CNN photojournalist Bethany Swain shows us why.
So after you stretch, we're going to do speed and power. This team has been around for 30 years. Number 4. And we still meet some people that think it isn't a sport until they see it.
I've also ran track and did lacrosse, and nothing seemed to keep my attention like jump rope did.
that is very physical and very demanding. And you did very well, and very mental also.
Like, people don't think of this when they first thing a jump rope.
Get a drink, one more time. I'm Jim McCleary. You're going to catch your partner for 1 minute? Yeah. And I'm the head coach of the Kangaroo Kids jump rope team.
I'm 17 and I've been jumping for 11, almost 12 years.
I've been coaching for 25 years.
Oh, there's speed and power events, which is like how fast you can go.
Ready? Got what we're doing?
Ready, ready, super ready, set, go.
It's kind of hard to count in your head if you want to talk or like coach somebody on. Okay, Courtney. And you click for every right foot they do.
Some of the speed ropes are now made out of wire and they go so fast you can't see them.
Oh, see, look awesome. Some sports are just team sports, or some sports are just individual. This can be both. Like you have your whole individual set, you can do pairs, you can do double, which is 3 or 4 people, and then you can do team show, which can be anywhere from 6 to 24.
We practice 15 to 20 hours a week at the height of competition season.
It's more like a dance gymnastics with a rope.
Physically, you have to be so fit.
I actually originally started because I was overweight.
You have to be able to do things like speed, freestyle.
Spread out, you're too close.
To be able to be a good jump roper, you do have to be able to do gymnastics, incorporate a little bit of dance.
I think it should be an Olympic sport. We're working toward that. It takes like 35 countries and 6 or 7 continents to be an Olympic sport.
And unfortunately, it's still a long ways away.
We're getting there. We're having a lot of fun on the way.
You think jump roping is easy?
Oops.
Well, the Kangaroo Kids jump roping team is about to change.
All right, that was very cool.
Yeah, so that was a story that I did.
Dawn, a menacing fire.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go to fire coverage, sure, and I recognize that piece is the next one. So I found that jump roping team because I was at a University of Maryland basketball game and they performed at halftime. So I saw the Kangaroo Kids and I just was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So I waited until there was a reason to be able to go to my bosses and be like, hey, I have an idea. So we actually did that project. So it released when the Olympics were happening. So when the Olympics happen, only NBC is allowed to show all of the sports and all of the broadcasts. So CNN didn't have the rights. So that meant that we were doing a lot in society and around and talking about sports. So I was like, hey, what if we did a project about sports that are not in the Olympics? And I have an idea. So the Kangaroo Kids, they let me come to one of their practices. And it was so impressive, just being able to see what they could do. And I love dancing, so the fact that they do some of it to music, I'm really into choreography in for one of my hobbies. So I was like, this is awesome.
Very cool. So we do have a question from the audience. I'm going to show it on our screen.
Okay.
So Amy asks, how long were you a photojournalist?
So I started doing photojournalism when I was in high school. So I did 10 years at CNN. So before I left, so now I'm full-time as a journalism professor at University of Maryland. So I still love doing photos and video, but it was about 15 years that I was doing it between local news and national news for CNN.
Okay. And then, so a follow-up on that. So you said you were a journalist at CNN. What other what local news were you a journalist?
Sure. So I'm from Burlington, Vermont. So I started for the NBC station in my hometown. And then I moved to Providence, Rhode Island. So I worked in the Providence NBC station. And then I came to the DC area, lived in Arlington, Virginia, and worked for News Channel 8. And then I worked for CNN for a couple of different departments.
Cool. Okay. Now, what kind of equipment did you use when you were a photojournalist?
A lot. So it was amazing. And something that what happened in every single place that I ever worked is that there was a change. So it's one of the things that if you are interested in going into many different jobs, including this one, every place that I was, we had a format change. So we would be working with one program and then another. We're working with one kind of a camera and then another one. So that happened just every single place that I worked. So it's pretty regular. So I was working with tapes, and then everything went digital. So the camera that I did the Kangaroo Kids story with was was one of the first HD cameras. So we made the transition to everything being high def. So the camera and the batteries and the wireless microphones would weigh about 40 pounds once everything was all there. So I would travel with, and usually in a minivan full of gear. So we'd have different light kits, a bunch of different audio equipment. So whether or not we were doing a press conference or a sit-down interview, and if we were doing live, so if we were broadcasting live, we had technology to be able to help with that. A lot of cables. So there are things that you can do wireless now. You used to be able to do that wirelessly. Oftentimes you had to run cables there. And for editing, right? So we would edit on laptops, on computers, and sometimes that we would have to just send our footage back to be done at the bureau or other parts of the company, at our headquarters in Atlanta or other places in the world.
Okay, so you had to be really good at learning new technology and new software, probably pretty quickly to do your job.
Absolutely. So problem solving was really what it was all about. So whether or not you were in the field and something wouldn't work the way it was supposed to, or that you were someplace and something broke and you would, if possible, have a backup, but you couldn't have a backup of everything. Yeah. So being able to problem solve, being able to troubleshoot, being able to figure out, okay, I have plan A and now what's plan B, is a really important skill to have. And when it comes to new technology, I mean, there's just stuff that's being rolled out all the time. So even now, I'll be using something and then I'll come back the next week and do it again. It's like, wait a minute, that was different a week ago. Right. So being able to adjust to those changes is really important, especially because when you're on the front lines of breaking news, of information, being able to get the information out is really important. I mean, think about how important it is right now for us to get information as news is changing. And so you don't want to be having some challenges that you can't overcome. So then this delay in getting the news out to your audience.
Right, right. So follow up on that. What kind of software were you using when you were a photojournalist?
Yeah, so when I first started editing on computers at CNN, we were using Final Cut Pro. I have used, I think, 6 or 7 different computer video editing programs over the years. So Final Cut Pro, Media 100, Avid, Grass Valley had one, and but now I'm use mostly the Adobe products, so Premiere Pro, Adobe Bridge, Photoshop. But it's whenever I am teaching or sharing about these programs, it's amazing how even though they're all different, the principles are the same, right? What makes a good story is still the same no matter what program that you are using. So really focusing on the things that are all connected versus what is unique about them. But yes, it's always learning new skills.
Right. Okay. Sorry, I'm getting attacked by a dog.
Please be safe. Yeah.
One of the pitfalls of working from home. We have 4 dogs.
Oh my gosh. Yes. My boys wish that we did. Yeah.
So now that you're a professor at University of Maryland, right? Yep. Do you teach the software that you use there, or are you teaching more principles of telling the story?
Yeah. So my courses are a combination of both. So I do a lot of skills-based learning, but as well as trying to teach all of my students what it is that they need to know, because if they came out with a degree and only knew how to use one program and had one set of skills, they would not have enough tools in their toolbox to be successful long-term, right? And I always talk about the goals of long-term success, right? Because stuff is always changing. So yeah, right now I teach 2 different courses at Maryland. So I do an intro to video class, which is one of my favorites. So it's teaching students the fundamentals. So about composition, we do a little bit of still photography because the still photography principles really do transfer over into what we are doing in video. How do you do interviews, asking questions? How do you make sure you get clean sound and clean audio? And then I also do a capstone class. So that's usually for seniors that they'll do towards the end of their time at Merrill College, and it's called Viewfinder. So it's an advanced video storytelling class where we produce short films and documentaries. So we'll take a theme and try and do a lot of first-person storytelling on that. So whether it is something like, so we have done the theme that I started at CNN with the other games. We've done some projects looking at other sports that are not in the Olympics, as well as some more intense reporting looking at healthcare and some other heavier topics.
Okay. Now, if a kid, one of the kids watching, was thinking about being a journalist, what are some things that they could do now before they get to college?
Sure.
Before they're an adult, what are some things that they could do now to sort of set them on that path?
Oh, what a great question. Yeah, so there are so many things that you could do no matter how young or old you are to help reach your goals. So things that I would recommend for kids to start doing now is to watch and read as much as possible. So really being an astute media consumer, right? So what does that mean? So some of my favorite things to listen to are podcasts with NPR. So they have some really great storytelling and really listening to how they do interviews, how they tell stories, and as well as reading the news, right? And being able to tell the difference between what is real journalism and what is stuff that is opinion, what is stuff that maybe isn't factual. So all the journalists that I know work really, really hard to be able to have the fundamentals and core principles of journalism, but not everything that you see out there are done by true journalists. So being able to know that difference and asking questions, being curious, right? You can interview your family. So right now, from wherever you're staying, you could interview the people who are around you, as well as either making phone calls or, using other technology to be like, hey, I want to reach out to someone and ask them about their life and really be a good listener, right? Really listening to what are they saying? What are, because being a journalist is not about being on TV. It's not about, hey, this is me. It's a privilege for us to be able to tell people's stories, of being able to have them open up and trust us to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. So developing that process of, okay, how do I listen? How do I ask questions? What kind of stories do I like to learn about? What kind of people do I want to talk to? Right.
And I encourage kids. Can you close, Parker? Can you close that door, please? Thank you. Sorry. I encourage kids, if you're watching this, interview your parents and record it and share it with us. If you put it up on YouTube, share it with us. We'll post links to it. Just as like Bethany was saying, ask questions. Yep. So we do YouTube stars at Pongos, right. And we encourage the kids to write down their questions and write down what they're going to say, so that it's a little, especially for kids that are just getting started, it's a little bit easier to sort of remember what you're going to do and what you're going to ask. So I just wanted to throw that in there for
absolutely having a plan, and then really listening for the answers to be like, oh wow, I didn't realize that my mom, my dad, my sister, my grandparent was going to talk about this. I have some more questions, not being afraid to deviate from that plan. But yeah, having a plan is a great way, especially when you're first starting and thinking like, oh, I might be a little bit nervous. Mm-hmm. So that's the time to really brainstorm. Like, what would I want to ask? What are some things that I want to know, and take advantage of this time? It's actually one of the assignments that my college students have. They are going to be interviewing a senior citizen. So I said it can be someone that or reach out to some and call an assisted living. And because there are a lot of people that are lonely right now who would love to have someone ask them questions and really listen, because we can't give hugs and do a lot of things that we would like to do and that we will be able to do again soon. Mm-hmm. But really having a listening ear and reaching out can make a big difference in someone's life.
Right. Do you ever teach continuing education to adults so that they can learn to do some of the things that you do?
Well, Chrissy, we need to get together and do this. So yes, it definitely has been on my wish list, because I do love it, because everybody needs these skills. So I've been saying this for years, but even more so right now, there are very few professions where having the skills of understanding the fundamentals of video, the fundamentals of listening, the fundamentals of writing isn't a huge benefit, and it's a great tool to have in your toolbox. So yeah, so stay tuned. I definitely am just looking for need more hours in the day to be able to do that. But I really look forward to being able to, because I've been teaching online. I've been teaching, for years. So I know that as we are making this transition and more people are coming and doing this, trying to share, like, hey, these are some of the fundamentals of things that even if you don't want to be a photojournalist, right? Because we don't need everyone to be a photojournalist, but be using those principles. So that way, whatever it is, whether you're a group fitness instructor, who wants to do video, or a classroom teacher with kindergarten kids, is really can be beneficial to absolutely everybody right now.
Right. So don't forget, if you're watching, if you have any questions, please comment them, and I can ask Bethany. I know I have lots of questions, so if you don't have any questions, it's okay. I can keep asking my questions.
Great.
So another question that I have, if one of the kids watching wanted to start doing video, what kind of equipment? Because they're not going to have obviously access to the high-end cameras or anything. What are some equipment that they could use to start making videos?
So you can tell stories with whatever equipment you have, right? So if you have access to a phone, then great. That's it's amazing the technology that you can have in your hand. So my boys, they have some of our older model cell phones, and when they're doing things, that's oftentimes what they're using. They're using an older iPhone, because the principles of asking a good question, of good composition, a lot of those things, it doesn't matter the tools that you're using. So is it nice to be able to have, high-end equipment? Absolutely. But it also comes with a price tag and a lot of responsibility, where I love the fact that my phone has this great case on it. So if it gets dropped, it's okay. It can be waterproof and stuff with the case that I have on it, where my other tools, they can't. So absolutely, it's never an excuse or a limitation of like, oh, all I have is this little camera.
Right.
You figure out, and when I tell my students this, like, don't let that be an excuse or a crutch. Even if you have a great camera, it takes more than just pretty pictures to make a story that's important or compelling or memorable.
Okay. Do you recommend them, if they are able to, or if their parents are able to get like a special light or anything, or I know we have a ring light downstairs.
Sure.
Unfortunately, my Wi-Fi isn't working very well downstairs, so I'm not sitting in front of my really good ring light right now. But we have a ring light, and then would you recommend a microphone or anything, or do you think just using the smartphone would be enough?
Oh, it's great to have lots of different tools and toys to be able to mix in and to do your news gathering and your reporting, but really understanding the fundamentals, because where you are right now, I have a professional light kit, but I'm not using it for this interview right now. We're just having a conversation, and I sat in my house paying attention to, hey, where's the light coming in, so I can have Mother Nature to be able to help a little bit in the lights that are already here. So learning about those fundamentals, is really a good starting point versus adding in a bunch of tools. And so a couple of things, with your phone, you can get some pretty good audio, and just knowing that being closer. So what I teach my students is the goal is to be within about a hand's distance away of wherever you're trying to record audio and whatever you're using to capture that audio. So if you are doing an interview, thinking like, okay, I need to get my recorder, whatever it is, again, phone, microphone, closer. So not, too close, but yeah, because audio doesn't zoom, where with your camera, you can zoom a little bit. It's much better to do what we call zooming with your feet. So that way you can get closer for your, to capture your video and your photos.
Right. Okay. Now and this is actually a question for, that I think the parents will find useful. A lot of us are on Zoom, and a lot of us are on GoToMeeting and other live meeting platforms, and a lot of kids are too. But I think the adults would be more concerned with this. How can they find good lighting? Like, do you want the light? Do you want the light behind you, in front of you, next to you?
Right. So I'm happy to show you what works and what doesn't. Right. So we are right in my house, and if I were right in front of my window, okay, this is backlit, right? Your eye is drawn to the brightest thing in the frame. So right now you're drawn to my backyard, and you can see our friend's picture of Oscar the Grouch that we have to make sure that We don't walk through that. So yeah, you can see the difference of having the light that comes on your face. So just by turning around versus having it here. So by thinking about the principle of that, your eye is drawn to the brightest thing in the frame. So you want that to be you when you're in this environment. So whether that means to move around, maybe that there's a shade behind you that you could open or close depending on which direction you're going to be sitting. And you can have a really big difference with just a couple of things without being able to have a whole studio, right? No one was planning for this, you know?
Right, exactly, yeah.
And there's a lot of busy things to do, but it can be as simple as, yeah, okay, where is the light? Yep, I want that to be coming in on me versus being behind me, so you're not backlit.
Right, okay. Yeah, and for anybody that watched my Facebook Live yesterday, I figured out how to make myself into a potato. So when I'm in the Zoom, I can give everybody in the Zoom a good laugh because I felt like everybody needed that. Everybody needs that.
That's great. I think humor is such a good way to deal with stress, to deal with life in general. So yes, finding those moments where you can make people laugh. So I always appreciate. And Chrissy, I love your sense of humor. So it's always.
I was a pickle for a little while too. A pickle and a potato. So.
Oh my goodness. I love it.
So is there anything that you want to say to wrap up, or any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our audience?
Sure. So one thing that I usually share when I talk about my career at CNN is that there are 100 people in my department from around the country. So we had 100 domestic photojournalists. So not our international based ones, but from LA to Chicago, Boston, DC, New York, all of our bureaus. I was one of only 5 women. So there are 95 men and just 5 women. So, that's something that I really want all the women to know is that the job title used to be cameraman. That was how much the assumption was that it was a man, but that doesn't mean that it has to be that way or that it should be that way. So there are women that do this. I'm proud of how many women that I have following in my footsteps from my classroom into the real world. So if I can support and you want it more, please do reach out.
All right, awesome. Well, Bethany, I appreciate you coming on camera with us and sharing your story and answering some questions. So again, everybody, if you want to watch more of the series, we are trying to do 3 a week, give or take. I know next week, I'm trying to remember who we have, but we have a mindfulness and academic coach on Monday, and I do remember on Friday, my husband is doing an interview. He is a K-9 technician with the U.S. Capitol Police, and we're going to bring him and a retired K-9 on to talk about what they do. So please come on in, and we'd love to have you. So again, thanks, Bethany.
Yeah,
I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.